to the Block. I'm your host, Emily Proud, and our entire crew is here for the very first time. You know these two well, Carl Reed and Blake Brockermeyer. Guys, let's start in South Bend. The Marcus Freeman era is officially beginning this weekend, because I'm not including last year's bowl game, and his first test as a head coach is a doozy. The Irish traveled to Columbus to take on the second-ranked team in the nation. Now, understandably, they're 17.5-point dogs to Ohio State. That's the third largest spread for an underdog by an AP Top 5 team since 2000. Now, Freeman actually learned about this massive line at a press conference this week and said this, quote, "I didn't know that. I'm going to write that down. You said 17.5 points, right? We'll use that in a team meeting today. It's good to know." Carl, is this coach speak, or can a betting line actually light a fire under this team?
A competitive guy will use anything to try to motivate himself and his team. There's all kind of reasons why this game is big. You had a point spread. Nobody thinks you have a chance to win. Everybody's picking Ohio State. You played at Ohio State yourself, so you get an opportunity to go against your alma mater. And there were some controversial things that you said earlier in the summer about the difference in education between Notre Dame and Ohio State. And you're a top 5 program. It's a lot of stuff here to unpack, but nothing that happens in terms of the point spread will get his guys any more motivated than they already are to try to knock off Ohio State. Blake and I have both picked them in our championship game for the college football playoff. There's enough motivation for Notre Dame out here to find a reason to beat Ohio State, and they're going to need everything they can because the Buckeyes are for real.
Yeah, I think you can get kind of hyped up and use this for motivation during the week to get your guys fired up and rallied up. But once that ball kicks off at the Horseshoe at night, it all bets are off, because this is going to be a different speed, a different tempo than both of these teams have seen in all of fall camp. So this is a huge game for both programs. Whoever loses this game has to basically win out to ensure themselves a chance to be in the playoffs at the end of the season. So this is a monster game. Great players are self-motivated. They don't need their coach to pump them up or create some fake story about win one for the Gipper. These guys are trying to get to the league. These are two of the top programs in the country. Their rosters are filled with NFL talent. And these guys are going to come out playing their best games of the year, because every single NFL scout is going to be watching this game, watching this tape, seeing the competition that they're going against. And that is a huge motivation for all of these players.
It kind of makes me think of the Last Dance documentary, when Michael Jordan is kind of trying to conjure up these controversies and slights to give himself some extra motivation. So Carl, I'll ask you this. Do you worry at all that Marcus Freeman feels like he needs to create something? Does this say that the guys aren't ready to go, or?
No, I wouldn't worry about that at all. He's a professional. He was the guy that they picked for that job. He's been in football a very long time as both a player and a coach. I think it's just something that popped up on him in an interview, and that was his response to it. But he knows how important this game is, not only for their season, but for their national championship aspirations. And make no doubt about it, Notre Dame expects to win, and win big during his tenure. That's the expectation that he has.
Certainly. Ohio State has won 22 straight season openers, which is currently the longest active FBS streak. Blake, I know that both of you guys are picking Ohio State to go to your Final Four. We don't think that streak is necessarily going to be broken on Saturday, but what about that 17.5-point spread? Do you think Notre Dame gives them a run for their money?
I would take the points in this game. It being the first game of the year, as good as Ohio State is, I would still take 17.5 points. It's going to be a tough game for Notre Dame, no doubt. Ohio State on paper is the better team, in my opinion. But that's a lot of points in a season opener. And Notre Dame's got a pretty good squad themselves. You know, like you said earlier, they're ranked in the top 5, which I think is a little high for them. But they got some guys, they got good coaching staff there. They're going to have to put together, they're going to have to run the ball, be physical on offense to try to eat some of the clock up. You do not want Ohio State on the field offensively as much as you can. And then I think they're going to have to take some chances. They're going to have to do some things to win this game that might not be entirely in their DNA, taking a few chances and risk here and there if they're going to pull off the upset.
Carl, what do you think?
I will go with the points as well, but I think it's going to be a very exciting game. I think that Notre Dame, although a heavy underdog, they do have some great players on their football team. They have one of the top tight ends in the country. They have a great young coach in Marcus Freeman. I think that it's going to be a little closer than what people think. But what Blake said is true. You want to run the ball. You want to chew up clock, because you do not want C.J. Stroud having possession after possession with those skill guys he has on offense, or it could get out of hand potentially.
I am so excited. We're talking about actual football that is happening and some big-time games, too, so I appreciate the conversation there. Let's switch gears, though. Boston College quarterback Phil Jurkovec told Boston.com that Brian Kelly lied to him and his parents while he was at Notre Dame. Now, this was about the status of Ian Book and their offensive coordinator, Chip Long. Jurkovec also said the coaches at Notre Dame treated people very poorly and, quote, the football team and culture is not what people think it to be. A lot to unpack there. Blake, I'll start with you. Is it fair for Jurkovec to call Brian Kelly a liar here?
I mean, I think this is par for the course in college football. I think lying, who knows whether it's true. That this is one side of the story. I mean, this could go either way, but it doesn't really matter because he's not there anymore. He sounds like he didn't have a great experience at Notre Dame. And this happens in college football. You cannot expect to be named the starting quarterback, and you have to compete. These are players that play at the highest level of college football. Brian Kelly is paid to win football games and put the best people on the field that he thinks gives him an opportunity to win. So, maybe he didn't think that Jurkovec was his guy. Who knows? It doesn't always go the way that you think college football is going to go. Trust me, I've got 3 kids that play college football. Things haven't always gone exactly the way that I've planned it to, but you just got to keep fighting and move on. If it doesn't work out for you, you've got the transfer portal now. He's transferred. He's turned out to be probably a better prospect than Ian Book or any of the Notre Dame quarterbacks are right now. So it's worked out for both parties. I think there's always bad blood, a little bit of bad blood when guys leave just because things don't work out. But who knows the true story.
Phil Jurkovec is what he's going through now is par for the course of college football. There's always going to be guys that are very upset with their head coach in the end of the game. Sources out of Notre Dame have told me Chip Long was really, really tough on Jurkovec during his tenure at Notre Dame. And what guys need to understand when they're going through the recruiting process, instead of just looking at the system that you're going to be running, whether or not you like the campus, or whether even you like the coaches that are recruiting you and the way they're recruiting you, you better make sure that you can play for the type of guy that you're going to play for and see him in action as a coach. College coaches are very, very tough guys. In terms of whether Brian Kelly lied to him or not, that's all a matter of interpreting the conversation. Did he promise him that he was going to be the starting quarterback? Did he promise him he was going to get rid of Chip Long in order to make him happy? Most of the time, when you see a guy who's won a lot of games leave an organization or leave a college football team, you have a bunch of guys that say, man, I'm glad he's gone. He was a really hard guy to deal with. All winners are very, very tough people to deal with day in, day out, and their expectations are sky high.
That's a great point, Carl. That the best coaches in college football, in my opinion, are guys that push you every day to be the best version of yourself that you can be every single day and to improve, and that makes your team better with competition. So there's very few coaches that are great coaches that are going to sit back and let you just do your own thing and let you get away with things that aren't the right way. And so Brian Kelly's one of those guys. He's got a great track record at all the places that he's been. He's a winner. He's a competitor. And sometimes that rubs people off the wrong way if it doesn't work out for them at the stop that they, had just gone to. And that's why there's a transfer portal now.
Yeah, along those lines, Blake, how do you manage that as a head coach, knowing that if you are unhappy, if you do push the kid maybe too far, that they could just pack up and leave? I mean, we talk about having to recruit your own players and how difficult it is in the transfer portal era. How does a head coach manage that? You hope every student athlete that comes in just wants to be pushed, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I think you've got to know the kids. You've got to know who you're dealing with. As a quarterback, if I were a head coach, I would take at least 2 high school kids every single recruiting cycle, because you're going to lose 1 or 2 guys in the portal every year if they're not starting. That's just the way college football is now. Kids don't want to sit and wait; they want to go play. So, and with the new rule of keeping 85 scholarships on your roster now, it becomes a lot easier to push your players even harder now, because the guys that you lose, you can replace immediately. And in the old days, it wasn't that way. You had to be really careful about, pushing guys too far, because if they left, it could really limit your roster. So I think it's a new age for football. I think coaches now are a little more careful generally at saying some of the things that maybe old school coaches used to say back in the day, but they're still doing it. I hear stories all the time of things that makes me kind of raise my eyebrows. But transfer portal works both ways for players and for coaches, and you can replenish your roster just as easy as you lose players now.
All right. Thank you, guys. It was overall just a tough week, though, for Brian Kelly. That's just the half of it. Lou Holtz said he wrote Brian Kelly 8 what he calls positive letters while at Notre Dame, and Holtz would check his mailbox every day, hoping to find an answer, and he never responded. Carl, is this Holtz just channeling his best impression of Noah from The Notebook, where he wrote every single day for a year? Or is there actually something here? Should Kelly have responded?
Who is still writing letters in the year 2022? You should have just texted him. Coach Holtz, this is my advice to you. When you want to get in touch with somebody, just shoot the guy a text. There's guys all over the country that I'm sure can get a hold of Brian Kelly. You probably one of them. Nobody's checking the mailbox. Send the guy an email. Nobody's text messaging anymore. It's like I said earlier in the show. When guys leave that were successful, now everybody wants to pile on and say, I didn't like this guy. I didn't like the way he did this. I didn't like the way he did that. You go to any great organization, in any business, any company, and when the guy who drove the results leaves, there's going to be a long line of people that say, man, I'm really glad that SOB is gone. He was very unpleasant to deal with. And everybody's happy that he's gone until the results change, because everybody thinks that a nicer guy can do it. This isn't a nice guy's business. This is a business for guys that win. I hope that Brian Kelly did hear that, though, and gets in touch with Coach Lou Holtz. He might not even have checked the mail. I personally haven't checked the mail in over 10 years. If you sent me a letter and I didn't read it, you can blame my wife, because I haven't checked mail. If you want to get in contact with me, just shoot me a text. It's the easiest way.
I think to me, it's a matter of respect. I mean, if it truly did happen with Lou Holtz trying to reach out to him, I mean, I'm sure if he really wanted to reach out to him, that he could have, figured out a way to actually get in touch with him. But, Lou Holtz is a legend at Notre Dame. He's a national championship coach that won one there. So, to me, it's a respect factor, whether you like him or you don't like him. I don't know how they get along or not, but there should be mutual respect between the two. They're both at the same high profile position at one of the better academic and football institutions in the country. And to me, it's, just a matter of respect.
Carl, your response to that?
Sometimes we have to understand that being a head coach is a lonely place. So when you're a guy like Brian Kelly and you do have a guy like Lou Holtz, who's a national championship winning coach, sometimes you decide that the better thing to do is to isolate yourself because that person still has contact with the alums, with the donors. You don't think that when Nick Saban was at Alabama or during his tenure at Alabama, there's a group of guys who doesn't think that Bear Bryant's way of doing things was better? And a lot of times head coaches just decide to lock in, focus on what they're doing, and leave the past in the past. And it might upset you in some regards, but sometimes that is the best way to go about it for certain people.
I think we can all agree here, though, Carl, you should really check your mail. I mean, that's you should check it. People still send letters. I don't know if you're getting any love letters in the mail, but bills, stuff like that, you might need to see.
Finally, I'm going to write you a letter, Carl. I'm going to see. I'm going to test this out and see if you can get it. I'm going to write you a letter today.
Perfect.
I'm going to put some money in there too.
Oh, man.
There we go.
My wife is going to give me the letter and she's going to take the money.
A smart woman. All right, guys. Earlier this week, Auburn Athletic Director Alan Green stepped down with just 5 months left on his 5-year deal. Now, this was following a tumultuous offseason that saw Auburn power brokers and some university leadership looking for a reason to fire Bryan Harsin, but he's still there, and it leaves everyone asking, with Green out, how much longer is Harsin coaching the Tigers? Carl?
Man, it seemed like they didn't want him back an awful lot. I was talking to a couple of guys I know that are connected to the Auburn program, and they said the hardest thing for the Auburn boosters to deal with is the fact that Auburn is just an 8 or 9 win program consistently, and nobody can deal with that. Can you believe that these guys got rid of Gus Malzahn? Now they have Bryan Harsin, and they're not happy with that. And so I think short of winning a national championship or beating Bama or doing something historic like that, it's going to be really tough for Harsin to hold on to his position because it seems like they already have their mind made up down at Auburn.
Yeah, Alan Green gambled and lost. He went against the boosters. I think everybody at Auburn, it seemed like Kevin Steele was going to be the guy to get that job. He's been a coach there and a very good coordinator for a long, long time. And so he went against the grain, picked his own guy, didn't work out year one. Then after the season ended, it just seemed like complete chaos. So, what's crazy to me is if they just beat Alabama, probably none of this happens. And so it just shows you how crazy intense one rivalry game can be for a coach's tenure in college football. But I think, the only chance he has now, his AD is gone now. And usually the AD and the coach are connected together. So he's going to have to win the SEC West, which is very unlikely to happen. Or I think if he wins, let's say 8 or 9 games and beats Georgia and Alabama, then I think he might have a chance to stay. But I think it's going to be a difficult road for him to put all this together. But hey, sometimes when these teams get their back against the wall and just focus on each other and really have a tight-knit team, they can put together a miracle year. Auburn's done it before, and we'll see if they can pull it together this year.
So I have a great view here in the studio. I can actually physically see when Carl Reed disagrees because he shakes his head. What does Bryan Harsin need to do to keep his job?
Win the national championship.
That's it?
It's just a really tough deal there. But I can tell you what, Blake made a great point when he said the AD and the head coach are typically attached together. And if you go 6 and 7 anywhere, it's going to be uncomfortable. If you go 6 and 7 as a middle school coach, everybody's going to be trying to run you out of town. You have got to win ball games. They didn't get it done. It's going to be just a tough deal. You got to circle the games at Alabama. You got to circle games like LSU, Texas A&M. Man, it's just such a loaded schedule. I just don't see how he can keep it unless he does something spectacular. And I don't know if they have the team for that this season.
Well, this isn't middle school. This is the SEC, and things are pretty intense in the SEC. We saw this week Tennessee Athletic Director Danny White tweeted after learning of Green's breakup with Auburn. He said this, quote, "Congrats for getting the heck out of a crazy situation for greener pastures. I admire how you managed that chaos with class and integrity. Now, White's dad and former Duke athletic director Kevin White called it, quote, disturbing and utterly shameful. He also said the apparent political dysfunction within Auburn is truly legendary. There are a lot of power-driven opinions and heightened expectations at some of these big-time programs. But as a coach, you kind of know what you're stepping into, right? Blake, could what's happening at Auburn make a coach go, no thanks, I'm good?
I think it depends on what coach you're talking about. If you've got a veteran coach who's been around for a long time and has a long history of winning, then he's probably not going to want to deal with it because he knows that the boosters are going to dabble in his program. But I think if you find a young coach that's hungry, that's earned the right and proven that he's capable of coaching the SEC West, the average salary in the SEC West as a coach is around $4.5 to $5 million a year. So I think a lot of coaches will put up with a lot of things that they normally wouldn't put up with for that kind of money, because you got to remember that money is guaranteed whether you win a national championship or you don't win a game. So that's a lot of money to deal with. I think there's a lot of coaches around the country that haven't had much of an opportunity to prove themselves at a big stage that would love a chance to go to the SEC West and compete against the best coaches and the best players in college football.
There's a line of guys that'll take $5 million a year. They might be hesitant in the beginning, but once they see the numbers on that piece of paper, they'll be lining up to go battle with those boosters. It's like White said at Tennessee, and his father also said, any sane person would maybe take a second look at it, but most guys that coach in the SEC aren't sane anyway. So you go in there and you just take your shot, and if you lose, you're going to probably walk away with $30 million, and that's a hell of a parting gift if you're not successful.
But Carl, does Auburn want that type of coach? They might have their sights set higher on a guy that maybe, doesn't care about the paycheck and wants a little bit more help from the administration. Does this lessen their talent pool that they're looking at from an Auburn standpoint?
Sometimes what we want, we can't have. They had a guy like that in Gus Malzahn, and they decided he wasn't good enough. So you might come out and swing for the fences, but in the end, only hit a double when it's all said and done and the smoke clears.
And at the end of the day, if you really look around the landscape of college football, there's only 3 or 4 coaches that are almost guaranteed to flip your program around right away and win. After that, it becomes a big gamble. So I think they're going to want a guy that's got proven experience, hopefully a guy in the SEC or someone from the South that has some ties to Auburn. But if you've got a guy that is a known winner, that's done it at the highest level, that's won national championships, they're not going to want to deal with these kind of boosters that dabble in their program and can really mess up the culture of what they're trying to build.
Well, I would not rule out the national championship quite yet. They have yet to lose a game, yet to win a game. It is a completely blank slate at this point, so we'll see what happens with Auburn. Guys, thanks so much. Remember, you can watch The Block every Monday through Thursday at 1 p.m. on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.